This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. If you're looking for a great holiday gift, there is nothing more meaningful than a Skylight digital picture frame. Skylight is a touchscreen frame that everyone in the family can send photos to from anywhere, and they'll pop up in seconds. It is the perfect gift for new families, parents, and grandparents, or anyone who has all of their photos stuck on their phone. With Skylight, you can actually preload photos before you give it as a gift, without even opening the box. Once it's unwrapped and plugged in, the frame will light up with all those special memories. Surprise your loved ones this year with a beautiful Skylight frame, now available in multiple sizes and colors. Grab yours today because they're very popular and sell out around the holidays. For a limited time, you can get $15 off your purchase when you go to skylightframe.com/Mary. That's right. To get $15 off your Skylight frame, just go to skylightframe.com/Mary. That's skylightframe.com/Mary.
Grandma, can I have the chocolate chips?
This secret recipe moment made possible by Emory Heart and Vascular Center. When Grandma needed heart care, she came to Emory. The difference? Emory Healthcare performs more heart procedures annually than anyone else in Georgia, which means better outcomes for our patients. And we offer advanced and personalized treatments developed by our top specialists that others don't. Like Grandma knows, where you start your heart care matters. Smart Cookie. EmoryHealthcare.org/smartcookie.
A choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality. A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Thomas. This week we get to talk to Trey Hudson. He is awesome. He wrote this great book called The Meadow Project, Explorations into the South's Skinwalker Ranch. It is an awesome book detailing the odd paranormal accounts in the deep south of the United States and how it relates to some odd phenomena that is also found in other locations around the world. Now, Trey is the current director of the Oxford Paranormal Society and the Anomalous Studies and Observations Group. Takes a team out there. He does some really cool investigations. He's got a great background with his military background. Thank you for your service, Trey. And he just does an awesome job with this. Guys, the interview is great. He is fantastic. His book will be linked in the show notes. And now, Trey Hudson.
Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war.
You damn right, Trey Hudson. Welcome to the show, man. We're really excited to get you on and talk to you about your book, The Meadow. Thanks so much, man. Well, tell my audience a little bit about you, that for those that don't know you.
Oh, well, I'm Trey Hudson. I'm the director of the Oxford Paranormal Society and also the leader of a division that we have in the Oxford Paranormal Society called the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. My background, I go way, way back with this stuff. I was a child of the 70s, watching old shows like Project UFO, which was a dramatization of the Project Blue Book investigations. It was a show back in the 70s, and grew up watching a delightful documentary known as In Search Of with the late, great Leonard Nimoy. So, I was actually weaned on the paranormal, like so many people of my generation as a child of the 70s. My father piqued my interest in this. He, while traveling across the country as a contractor who would work out of state, he had heard a radio show with the late Brad Steiger, and picked up his one of his books, and it brought it home, and I read it and was just fascinated. Just the hook, the worm was put on the hook was thrown in the water, and I gobbled it up like an eager young fish, and just loved this stuff. So I kind of stayed up with it, was interested in, most of the aspects of the paranormal, UFO. Back in the 70s, a lot of really neat Bigfoot docudramas were coming out. Who can forget the Legend of Boggy Creek, things like that. So I was really immersed in this stuff. And I went to a university that has a very broad way of looking at the world. It's a University of West Georgia, one of the few universities that has a humanistic and transpersonal psychology program. So we're very experiential, in the way that we look at how human beings interact with their surroundings, their environment, and other human beings. And I studied under such people like the late Dr. William Roll, Bill Roll, who's a very famous parapsychologist, Chris Anstoos, who's a legend in the humanistic psychology movement, Mike Ahrens, who was actually recommended by Abraham Maslow to lead our department, and Don Rice, who's I think the current head of the department. So I studied with these gentlemen and some other great psychologists and professors, and my interest in this stuff never really waned. It was always there. While I was in university, I attended the last 2 years on a U.S. Army scholarship and was eventually branched as an Army intelligence officer in the U.S. Army Reserves. Did a little stint as a private investigator. I was also, like I said, in the Army Reserves and 2 units there. Unfortunately, an injury ended my military career pretty early, spine injury. That's just the way things go sometimes. So I decided to go to work for the government as a civilian, not as a soldier. So I've been doing that for the past 31 years, and I've done everything from anti-terrorism, protection of weapons of mass destruction, operation security, intelligence, counterintelligence, just a whole gambit of stuff. Some emergency management. I went over to Afghanistan for a while, did some stuff as an operations and anti-terrorism officer over there. Hunted big game in Africa, North America, Eagle Scout, just all of that kind of stuff. So just what I tell people, I'm just an ordinary guy who's got a chance to do some extraordinary things in my life.
That's what's so cool about it. I think it's fantastic, man. So thank you for your service, first of all. And I think that it is important to highlight your military career because you do take a very analytical and a very tactical approach to your investigations, which I think is awesome. You do a wonderful job with it. Your book details that account incredibly well. And we are going to go over some accounts in your book, and it will be linked in the bottom down here in the show notes so people can find it. But again, thank you for your service. I have a high regard for people that choose to join the military and that are brave enough to do that. And then also, so I think it's interesting to the point that you made about you're just an ordinary guy that has an opportunity to do extraordinary things. Now, we expand on that a little bit because there are a lot of people out there with 9-to-5s that feel like they're not qualified or that they don't deserve, or for whatever reason they feel that they're stuck and that nothing extraordinary will happen to them for whatever reason. How would you give folks the confidence to do something like you're doing in any area?
Carpe diem, the Latin saying carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah,
is we can be comfortable in our existence, in our day-to-day life, which is fine. That is perfectly okay if that's what people are happy with. But there is an incredibly wide, diverse, amazing world out there. And don't be afraid to jump out there and try something new. Back in the 70s, there was a little boy at the age of about 12, and he was watching these TV shows like In Search Of, where they would go to strange and mysterious locations. That little boy found a strange and mysterious location and ended up writing a book about it. It can be done.
Yeah.
You just got to get off your couch and do it.
That's it. And, my motto with that is there's you've seen that picture where it says like your comfort zone, and then it's got an arrow pointing outside of it. It's a circle that says your comfort zone inside of it, and there's an arrow pointing outside of it, and it says where the magic happens. You can be content with just having your life, and that's fine. But for folks that feel like they want to do more, I think that that's great advice. And carpe diem, man, seize the day and go out there and find you a dope-ass paranormal spot to hit, man. I think that's really cool. So what got you started with the writing a book in general? What made you want to do that?
Well, we had been investigating the Meadow, or this region, this area, which, like I said, it was sort of accidental. We just sort of happened to find it by following the folklore and the history. And that information's out there for the taking. It's, you just have to sit down and, roll your sleeves up and do the research. Well, COVID hit. And a lot of people were not quarantined, but were sequestered at home with a lot of extra time on their hands. So I thought, well, this would be a good time to sit down and start going through my field notes. And while I'm very organized during my investigations, unfortunately, I'm not terribly organized when I bring my notes home. So I had to, dig around in some different files on my computers and find some hard copy notes. And I had this big stack of data, and experiences and various readings from instrumentation, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought to myself, this would be a good opportunity to put this in some kind of coherent narrative, where if somebody was interested in this, maybe they could read it and maybe glean some information out of it. So I sat down, and the way I decided to approach this was an expository type writing, that I'm just basically going to say what happened, in a narrative. Like if you and I were sitting down, across the table drinking some beers, I could say, hey, Brandon, let me tell you this amazing story. And I would start at step one.
Yeah.
So that's how I approach writing this thing. And so when I got into about 20,000 words, I'm like, this is kind of starting to look like a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, let's pull out our sabers, bear down, and charge ahead and see where it takes us. And before it was over, I ended up with a manuscript. And started fishing it out to different publishers, and I was picked up by a Flying Disc Press out of the UK.
Yeah, and
here we are.
That's awesome. So, did you contact Philip directly, Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press, or did he find you?
Actually, Philip and I have a mutual friend, and she and I had corresponded on some stuff. The Cat Hobson, who does Fate Radio and all of that, and she said, let me give you the contact information of Philip Mantle. And, I said, hey, I'm going to send you this manuscript, and, are you interested? And he said, yeah, absolutely. I'm interested. And, and then about, a dozen editing hacks and, squeezing the last bit of coherence out of it and polishing it and, presenting it for the public. Here we are.
It's so cool. It's a great read, and like you said, it's an awesome story. So the subtitle of that book is The South's Skinwalker Ranch. So will you just briefly explain Skinwalker Ranch to those that don't know, and then we can get into why the Meadow relates to that?
Sure. Skinwalker Ranch is a locale in United County, Utah. It has a very long history. It's literally a ranch. It's a working ranch. It has a very, very long history of high strangeness, going all the way back to First Nation people. They considered this area where this ranch is as cursed. And the reason it's called Skinwalker Ranch is based on the beliefs of the Ute tribe, as skinwalkers had tainted this particular area, and they wouldn't even go onto this area. They considered it, taboo. And as we moved into the 20th century, you had various families that would own this ranch. And back in, I believe, the 90s, stories started coming out about some very strange happenings on this ranch. It ran the gambit of everything, not just UFOs, which, of course, are reported there, but cryptid beasts, portals, poltergeist activity. So all of the paranormal goodies, that are out there, you can just put all in this giant box called Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
The Skinwalker Ranch was actually purchased by Robert Bigelow, the famous, entrepreneur, owns Bigelow Aerospace and all kinds of other things. And he set together a team of scientists, former military people, and established an organization called the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS. And he sent his personnel out there to investigate this paranormal hotspot. The downside of it is it's starting to come out now that some of the NIDS activities there were actually contracted through Department of Defense. And I'm hearing rumors that it was the Defense Intelligence Agency. And contrary to popular belief, and I can tell you this from professional experience, if the government wants to keep a secret, they can.
Yeah.
So, as Mr. Bigelow, when he's been interviewed, he says, look, I had a contract and I have certain non-disclosure elements of, this contract. and I just can't disclose everything that went on at Skinwalker Ranch. Well, several years ago, he sold it to a Salt Lake City real estate developer named Brandon Fugel. And Mr. Fugel has owned it for the past few years, and he's a little bit more open with some of his research and some of the findings of his team out there at Skinwalker Ranch. But what really made me tie the Meadow into Skinwalker Ranch, and when I call it the South Skinwalker Ranch, not in the fact that I think it's cursed by skinwalkers, nor is it a ranch, but in a holistic sense, it has all of this same type of elements of high strangeness that is seen out there in Utah, in United County. Because when I started kind of putting together, my notes and looking at all the different elements of high strangeness, I'm like, yep, that's a Skinwalker. Yep, that too. Well, doggone it, this is like our Skinwalker Ranch right here in the South.
It's so cool. And there's several of those types of locations around the world where anomalous activity happen, usually on ley lines or where particular energy grids cross. People have noticed that. But it's got to do, and I love that your referral to the Skinwalker just simply because of the variety and abundance of phenomena that are found there. It's not just seeing UFOs. It's not just seeing a Bigfoot. You're seeing every damn thing you can imagine out there. And then it keeps getting stranger and stranger the more you investigate it. Even down to, and I know we're probably going to talk about it, but the lady walking around out there in a skirt in the middle of nowhere. And so I do want to get to that. But so how did you stumble upon this location where the Meadow is? And I know it's classified, so I know we're not going to talk about its exact location because we don't want a bunch of yahoos out there.
Right. And I'll go ahead and apologize to your listeners now. I am not going to discuss the exact location because I want to keep the site as pristine and as involatile as possible. I don't want it to be under siege by curiosity seekers like the actual Skinwalker Ranch is, which, they have to keep a large security force there to keep people from going in there and messing things up. So I'll just go ahead and apologize for that now. I'll also say that all of the names in the book, like the Blackwater Nature Preserve, Baskin's Hollow, Cold Springs Camp, those are all fictitious names.
Right.
They're, a representation of a real place, but they're fictitious. But how did this happen? Quite a few years ago, there was a hobby which still exists called geocaching. It's you hide little boxes somewhere and you put the coordinates on the web and people go out there and find a box, sign a log book, and do stuff like that. And I decided to make it a little bit different because in my local area there was a geocaching group, a kind of a confederation, and we were doing our best to just outdo one another. So I had run across some folklore of a haunted cemetery, that a road had been built across an ancient cemetery and the ghosts would come up from their graves at night because the roadway was built over the top of them, like these really pissed off spirits. And it's like, well, folklore, especially here in the South, we have a rich history of haints and boogers and stuff like that. I thought, well, that's just kind of cool folklore. Why don't I tie it into a geocache? So what I did is I took this locale and I elaborated the backstory, and I hid this geocache out in the middle of the Blackwater Nature Preserve. And the only way you could find this geocache is to go to a particular grid coordinate, shine your flashlight around, and you would hit a glint marker on a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would go to that glint marker, shine your light 360 degrees, find the next one, until you came to a particular pattern that denoted the end of the trail. And the geocache was within about 30 feet of that last marker. The trick was there were no glint markers leading you back.
Yes, this is the best part.
And so, there was a big, bold, type warning saying, make sure that you waypoint and mark the coordinates of your automobile, because I'm not telling you how to get back.
Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, it sounds like such a fun thing to do, man.
Oh, yeah. And people loved it. I mean, people would come from all over to do this geocache. And I started getting these just rave reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one particular review that kind of captured my interest. And this guy said, we went and we did your geocache. It was a lot of fun. And then we went to the cemetery because I gave the coordinates to the haunted cemetery too. And he goes, we looked at that and looked at some of the old graves, and we were out there at night. It was kind of cool. And we decided we would just ride around a little bit in that area. Well, they were riding around a little bit, and they pulled over and they were exploring some stuff. And this pickup truck pulled up right to where they were in the woods. and this firearm came out of the window of the pickup truck.
Yep.
And what had happened is some of the locals saw one of the geocachers who was, now just exploring, with two headlamps on his head. He had like a white one and a red one or something really weird. And they thought it was some kind of,
monster.
Monster, sort of, luminous eyes, stalking them in the dark. And they were frightened.
Yeah.
And, it's like, whoa, don't shoot. I'm just out here kind of exploring. And they're like, hey, boy, what are you doing out here in the woods? And
thought you was a damn chupacabra.
Yeah, chupacabra. Thought you were one of them boogers or haints out there.
Yeah.
And they started talking. And they said, okay, that's kind of cool. But whatever you do, don't go down this particular county road that's a few miles from here, because it's really haunted and really bad stuff happened on this road. So don't go. So this guy, puts all of this in his little narrative as he's, writing his review of the cache. And I'm reading and I'm like, okay, he just said not to go to that road. What road do I want to go to? I want to go to that road.
That exact same road, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And it was several years before I could get somebody to go with me. People's lives were getting in the way of their living. We know how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2015, I finally had some friends of mine that accompanied me to this region, to this area. And we researched this road. And that was one of our first anomalous happenings. It was in 2016. Where things really started kicking off in the Meadow.
Mm. What were the stories about the road that they said? Were there any particular instances that were the local? I know they're probably more of like urban legends around there, rural legends, we should say, because they weren't an urban setting.
Yeah. Right.
But they, what were a couple of them that they were trying to warn you off from?
Well, they said that there were, ghosts, and there was. People have been murdered on that road and it doesn't feel right. It's just one of those areas that, has a stigma about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went back and looked in some of the folklore and I couldn't find anything specifically written about this area. But, I thought it's worth checking out, because when I did start kind of researching the general area, which about the first 25% or 1/3 of the book talks about the history of this area. When you start really delving into it, there's like a lot of weird crap that goes on in this region.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I thought, well, this is definitely worth giving it a shot. If nothing else, it gets me off of my couch and out into the field doing some research.
Yeah. Yeah. Get some exercise, have some fun, do something spooky. That's cool.
Right.
And so you stumbled upon the Meadow based on a geocache that you set up, based on a review that somebody else said, don't go down this road. So then you follow that trail. It's almost like the synchronicity, like you're destined to find this place on some level. What inspired you to do the geocache in that particular area? Was it just because it was close and there was a cemetery there?
It was just kind of a cool piece of folklore.
Yeah.
And I've always liked geocaches that are in very remote locations. I think it's challenging.
Yeah.
You really have to be on your game as far as navigational skills. And it was something that hadn't been done before.
Yeah, it's an adventure. And
yeah.
But the fact that it was there, and then that this person doing your geocache stumbled across somebody that told him about this road, and then that led you to that road, which led you to the Meadow. It's this cool synchronistic type of a thing. Like you were destined to do it. I think it's cool. Right.
And the Meadow, which is about half a mile from a campsite that we eventually ended up using quite a bit, wasn't really the focus of our original investigations. We were investigating the haunted road, which is, several miles away, about 20 miles away from where we originally started camping. And, we thought we were going to have all this activity on this supposed haunted road when the real activity was happening back at the campsite near the Meadow.
So cool. Yeah. It's kind of like that story of Toad Road. Is that in Pennsylvania or something like that? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's similar. There's just haunted stretches of road where just weird shit happens. Okay, cool.
Right.
So then how did you discover that the Meadow was where the action was?
Well, like I said, one of our first investigations, a friend of mine and I decided to go quite a ways south and investigate this haunted road. And there's a backpacking trail called the Possum Trot Trail that traverses the Blackwater Nature Preserve. And we figured we would go out here, and it was in January of 2016. We would hike along this haunted road. We would catch the Possum Trot Trail, go around a mountain called Berger's Peak, and then re-intersect the road and then hike back to our vehicle. And we would just see what happened.
Yeah.
I have a good friend named Bob that we left back at base camp to watch our gear. We were able to communicate with radios using a local repeater. And my friend Daryl and I, hiked around this peak. And it was the winter time at a high elevation, rainy, cold night. And we heard a quail call, a Bob White whistle, like that.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh my goodness, this must be something cryptid because Bob Whites don't live at this elevation in the wintertime. So, we're like, oh, this is so cool. This is amazing. And we thought we had really accomplished something, but we were excited. We get back in my Jeep and we're driving north back to our campsite. And we get on the radio, hit the repeater, talk to Bob back at base camp. Bob, you're not going to believe what happened. And he goes, yeah, right. Wait until I tell you what happened.
To him back there at the campsite.
Right. So we're the action doesn't take place back at the base camp. It's always with your field team.
Right.
So we got there and eagerly told him about our somewhat lame and impotent Bob White story, which turned out to be, just pathetic. And he goes, well, let me tell you what happened to me. He said that he was, at the campsite, had the fire going and kind of watching the gear, sitting there drinking coffee, was quiet. And he decided he needed to do, what men have to do in campsites when they're remote, when they drink too much coffee. He stepped away from the camp and was taking care of some biological bit.
Yeah.
That's right. And he's standing there, looking around through the mist and the rain, and the moon comes up. And he thinks to himself, wow, what great luck. It's starting to clear up. I can see the moon now, and the rain is finally breaking. Maybe we'll have a dry weekend. So he's watching this big luminous orb in the sky, and this orb starts moving sideways from right to left.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately realized, I'm pretty sure the moon doesn't move sideways.
Not in my experience, no.
Yeah, no. And so he's watching this thing, and it moves laterally, like I said, from right to left, and stops. And it's hanging there. And in the middle of this luminous orb, he sees a tiny black dot. And this black dot starts growing larger and larger, like the iris of a camera.
Yeah.
Until it grows so large that all he has is like a white circle or ring, like a necklace of diamonds effect during a solar eclipse.
Yep. Okay.
And it eventually completely winks out. A little bit later, he notices a series of lights up on top of a ridge, like a cluster of about 10 lights, like little tiny lights. Not fireflies, because this is in January.
Right.
And these lights, anomalous lights, play into this experience, throughout, this entire investigation. Or lights in the forest seem to have a real commonality with this particular location. So, when Bob told us about his experience, our Bob White story was a little bit lame. It was pretty pathetic. But so that kind of piqued our interest in that. And the rest of the weekend we did a little exploration and all, and there was a meadow about a quarter of a mile, half a mile away from camp, where this UFO sighting took place. And we thought that we would go there and walk and see if we could find like a track line, from a cryptid or something, and just kind of check it out. And it just so happens it's a beautiful spot. It's remote. You can not too terrible of a hike, from our base camp. And we decided it would just be a nice place to investigate. And so we just kind of happened to stumble across it.
Yeah. It's amazing. Do you know of any, are there any military bases nearby or installations of any kind?
Yeah, there are. But the military bases that are nearby do not do rotary wing, do not do fixed wing. So there's no, they don't. It's more of I'm not going to go into what they do, but they're more self-contained. They don't send troops out and do things. They're, pretty much everything stays right there on that base.
Okay. And it's just because it makes me think of, especially with all the anomalous stuff with the lights, the Rendlesham Forest case, right. Then you've got sightings of Bigfoots near bases. It just seems that the paranormal or these type of activities tend to happen adjacent to military bases. There might be a correlation, there might not. I was just curious. Well, what happened on the next night you guys were out there?
Well, really, that was the end of that weekend. The UFO and hiking to the meadow and looking for tracks and stuff. And we thought, well, yeah, this is kind of cool. So why don't we just make it a point to come back here sometime in the future?
Yeah.
Well, in July of 2016, during the summer, we decided to come back about 7 months later because we were really intrigued by this meadow. And we started really researching it. And the way we decided to research it this time is have some teams set up in the meadow itself. There's a large ridge to the south of the meadow, which the Possum Trot Trail runs on top of this ridge, and a creek to the north. And we decided let's put some teams in the field and have them equipped with FLIR units, which is a heat detecting monocular. It basically detects thermal heat, and see if we find anything. And we sent one of our team members across the ridge, and he was going to act as a driver. He was going to drive anything from the ridge down to us and see if he could push anything to the west end of the ridge, where we also had or west end of the field, where we also had a team that might see something coming off the ridge on the far side of the meadow. So we set up, and this gentleman, Bob, started his maneuvering, started his trek. And he radioed us, and he said, "Hey, I'm at point X, which is a well-known landmark." He said, "And I don't remember how I got here." And so we were concerned. Did he have some sort of cerebral event, like a stroke or a clot, or something like that? Did he fall? Is he injured? And we started asking these questions, and he sounded coherent. He wasn't slurring his speech. He hadn't fallen. He just doesn't remember getting to this particular landmark. And most of the folks on my team are very driven type A kind of people, or we wouldn't be out there researching. And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. I want to continue on up over the ridge. Let's not call this off. I'm fine." Okay, fair enough. So he continues over the ridge, drops down into the west end of the meadow, and is moving to link up with one of the teams. The team that's watching him through their FLIR monocular consists of one gentleman who's a former U.S. Army Ranger, has a degree in physics from Georgia Tech, and is a very, very smart, competent, serious individual.
Yeah.
His teammate likewise has a degree from Georgia Tech, a master's degree, and currently works as a senior paramedic at that time.
Damn,
Once
so
again,
legit folks.
Yeah, solid, legitimate, down-to-earth folks.
Mm-hmm.
So they're watching Bob through their FLIR unit, and they see a man-shaped heat signature walking along the edge of the meadow as he's approaching them. And this heat signature all of a sudden turns into an orb or a sphere of energy, of heat. It moves at a very rapid speed. We figured the speed to be about 25 miles per hour, stopped, and then turned back into a man-shaped heat signature.
Damn, that's cool.
So once again, this was Bob who had the missing time. I was like, okay, something has happened to Bob.
Yeah.
Something's
going on with Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Bob is jumped down the rabbit hole, and we're really concerned about him. So they rush over to Bob, and they radio him, "Are you okay?" And they see on their FLIR unit his heat signature, bring the radio up to his mouth and reply. So this definitely is Bob, what they just saw. So they get to him and they're like, man, are you okay? And he's like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" "Well, you just turned into this, this energy thing, and you moved at 25 some odd miles per hour." And he goes, "No, I didn't. I was just walking along the meadow." So it was like a really weird, and we actually have had some pretty heated arguments over this, or not arguments, but discussions.
Yeah.
Whose perception was right and whose perception was wrong? And Bob's point of view, he's just walking along. In their point of view, he turned into a ball of energy. So whose time was dilated and whose perception was altered.
That's the mind-blowing part about this. So he didn't notice a terrain change. He didn't notice being lifted up. It was just a snap from one place to another. But he, in his mind, thinks that he traversed that on foot the entire way.
Yeah, just walking. To him there was no compression of time. There was no loss of time. There was no feeling of disorientation. He just was walking along like he normally would.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about his GPS unit in a minute, but was there any differences in watches or GPS units or anything like that for anybody?
No. Now we have had problems with some of our electronics, and actually what we do now is right here. This is an analog automatic watch.
Yeah,
it's not electronic, so we use analog equipment as much as we can out there because we've had some problems with watches and such. But no, there was nothing anomalous at that time. That's something that we want to look in the future, is if we can come up with a field deployable, highly accurate timepieces that we can set a baseline, leave one timepiece in the Meadow, and see if time is contracted or expanded. That's an experiment we want to do in the future. But we haven't quite been able to find the right kind of timepiece that would do that.
Yeah, you can't just toss a Timex out there. You're going to need like an atomic clock or something like that.
Yeah. So that's something that's in our future. But so that was that was pretty weird.
It's pretty weird and pretty incredible. Thought, I've never heard of anything like that happening.
Right. So nor have I. And so we're thinking, well, this obviously just can't get any stranger, than Bob missing time and then turning into a luminescent orb and running around the Meadow with his hair on fire. Well,
I'm sure you were right, and that nothing weirder than that happened, right? And then that was the end of the story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Why else would we be going out to the Meadow for the next 2 or 3 years?
Right.
So the next morning, Bob, as we were, cooking our breakfast and all and having our coffee, Bob came up to our group around the fire and he goes, "Hey, I want to show y'all something." And he pulled out his GPS unit. Bob has a very good habit of always having his GPS running when he's in the woods. So it constantly runs a continuous track of where he's been during each outing.
That is a good habit. He probably followed your geocache and got lost one time when he didn't do it. And he's like, never again, man. This thing is staying on.
Where's my car?
Couldn't you put red ones on the back of the trees, man? It wouldn't mess with the experience.
So he showed us his track from the previous night. And it showed several long, straight line, linear tracks of about 2 to 3 kilometers in length. You cannot traverse over this terrain in a straight line on foot for 2 or 3 kilometers. You just can't do it. It's too rugged.
Yeah.
So the only way that a person could have traversed in a straight line for 2 or 3 kilometers in this area was in the air.
Mm. Damn, now Bob can fly.
What happened to Bob with his missing time?
Yep.
What happened in that little sliver of time when he appeared to be an orb of energy?
And that was only for about 25 yards for only a few seconds, let's say?
It was about, I would have to go back and look at my notes. It was about 100 yards in several seconds. So it was, we calculated out he would have had to have moved. The orb moved at about 25 miles an hour.
But you saw it move in a straight line across the field, not in the directions that his GPS tracked.
Yeah, no,
Damn.
Right. His GPS tracks were entirely independent of most of his movements of that evening.
And even that is strange because you'd think if he was wearing a clock or something or a watch, that would be altered if the GPS was altered also. But it seems like time didn't change for him, but the location the GPS said that he was in changed and in extremely anomalous ways.
Well, and that's a good point. And you start getting into some quantum weirdness here. What if he stayed stationary and reality moved underneath him, but he stayed in the same place?
Yes, absolutely. You're on the right show, man. This is great.
So, it's, you just start getting into, you start thinking about this stuff and all this quantum weirdness starts popping up, and next thing you know, you're down to your 4th or 5th beer and it all starts to make sense.
Absolutely.
So, later that night, the Saturday evening, this was Friday morning, Bob showed us that we did some more stuff that evening. one of our base camp operators said, "Hey, this Saturday evening, I see y'all are coming back into camp. I see your green headlamps up on top of the ridge. Why are y'all using the ridge instead of the trail?" And it's like, we're still in the meadow. I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And he started really looking at this green light, and it turned out to be about 30 feet off the ground, moving around like a green lensed headlamp. So once again, it's that strange lights, up on the ridges and up in the trees.
Yeah. And it is almost associated with the folklore, with like fairy lights and things like that in the forest, especially in the area. So I think it's interesting too that you follow the folklore, which got you to this point, and now you're seeing examples of what, people back in the day that didn't have lamps or didn't have flashlights and car lights and things like that were reporting.
Right. And there's, even here in the U.S., I mean, you can go back to, this area that we've been exploring is, peopled by folks mostly of Scots-Irish descent. Like many areas in the South, and you have a lot of Gaelic folklore that come over, the wee people, the wisp, fairies, things like that. And then you go and you start looking at things like the Brownsville lights and some other anomalous lights that are out there. So this is a very real phenomena.
Yeah.
And here we are experiencing it, right here in our little meadow.
Yeah, and just like the Marfa lights, and just like Richard Rokeby's book, the Burton Hill, Bassett Hill. Have you heard of that? 1923, they had those lights over there in the UK. It's very cool. But same type of phenomena, and it is pretty prevalent and in these interesting hotspot type of areas. But that's not all you saw. So where does the story go from there?
So the same guy, the radio operator, our base camp chief, once again had to get up in the middle of the night and shake hands with an old friend. And so he's taking care of business, and he notices this white humanoid shape kind of peering around a tree, like the upper shoulders and the head, watching us, watching our camp, maybe 30, 40 yards, 30, 40 meters from our camp. So he goes to wake up one of our teammates who has a very high-end FLIR unit. And he's like, Kristen, wake up, get your FLIR. Something's out here. By the time she can get her wits about her, get her equipment and get out there, whatever it is was gone. To give you some background on Glenn, he's a career paramedic, was a flight medic for many, many years, a very solid, grounded person, a professional, with years of experience, seeing all kinds of high stress and weird stuff through his years as a paramedic and flight medic. Flew all over the world as a flight medic. So, once again, another well-grounded individual. The individual he woke up is a ER nurse. Once again, another well-grounded, educated person. They could never find whatever this thing was, with her FLIR unit. Never showed up again. The next day, several of us have taken courses in man tracking people through the forest. So we went over there and we looked for tracks, disturbed vegetation, any marking on the tree where something might have put its hand or leaned up against it, and we could find no indication of anything was there. But nevertheless, you go back and you look at the folklore of this area, and there is a history and reports of a white humanoid figure in this general area that people have seen.
Damn, just watching people pee. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
The peeing peeper, I know that's not what it's called.
The peeper. There you go.
The peeper. But now I got myself tickled. Anyway,
I like to class the show up here, so yeah, you're good.
Nothing but the finest entertainment.
Absolutely, man. You got to. I love it. That's gonna be my tagline. I'm gonna throw that in the intro. So what happened after that? So no physical evidence left by this being, but there is a history of folklore in the area with the exact entity or with the cryptid that you saw.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the one of the last things of that weekend. The white entity or creature looking at us, and so. We're like, well, crap, this is like a really cool, fascinating place. Why would we not continue to come back here?
Yeah.
And some more people, in my circle of friends heard about it. I have a pretty well-known group out of the Carolinas that do cryptid research, and they're kind of looking at it from the cryptid angle. They're like, this is really cool. Can we come down there and visit with y'all? And I was like, yeah, of course. This isn't, as long as you sign the non-disclosure agreement about the location, I'm down with it.
Absolutely.
And so they came down in February of 2017. So we waited a few months. You don't want to saturate a site with over investigation. So we try to wait about 6 months to a year between visits. And it turns out that 2017 in February, once again in the wintertime, and the fact that it's winter plays a very important role in this particular expedition, we decided to get together and do another visit, another expedition. Once again, using the same methodology that we had done before. And before we ever go out in the woods, we always have a pre-operational brief. Everybody knows where they're going, what their mission is, who the teams are, what the radio call signs are, who's running the radio net back at base camp. So we try to do this in a very organized, sensical way.
Right.
It makes things run a lot smoother, and I think it's a lot safer. So, we took the same course of action, in 2017. We had 3 teams out in the field. Each team was equipped with a FLIR unit. We had another team of 3 people that were going to run across the top of the ridge and see if we saw anything from our higher vantage point on the ridge, because this was the wintertime. There was no vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
So the team I was on was the ridge running team, and we're moving across the top of the ridge, and we stopped adjacent to the west end of the meadow. And usually about this time, we drop down off the ridge and come into the west end of the meadow, meet up with the westmost team, and work our way back east. While we were stopping and gathering our gear together, getting ready to drop off the ridge, one of our team members noticed in his FLIR unit 3 figures, man-shaped, human-shaped, standing side by side, putting off heat in his FLIR unit. These 3 figures meld into one figure.
Damn.
And I can get into some interdimensional explanations on why that is.
Yeah.
And why that would appear that way.
Yeah.
With 3 legs that drops down into a two-dimensional world, you're going to interpret that as 3 individuals or 3 things. But as the stool keeps moving through the two-dimensional world, the legs mold into one. And then as it passes through the two-dimensional world, it disappears from the perspective of the two-dimensional world people. So that might be what we're experiencing, is things winking in and out of existence in our dimension. And we're seeing things that appear to be multiple, but are actually part of the same entity or organism or machine or whatever.
Yeah, like that Flatland book, written back, what,
right.
in the 30s? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Right out of Flatland.
Yeah.
So we observed this, and it's like, well, holy crap, there's something's down there.
Yeah.
So we immediately drop down off of the ridge and go to, start approaching some of the other team members. And over the radio, we get communications from the team that's in the middle of the meadow. And they said, we're picking up something very strange on our FLIR unit. And it's like, well, what are you picking up? And they said, we're picking up these cubes forming that were about 10 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters, basically like a big box.
Yeah.
Okay, which is interesting because if you go back and you look at the history of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, there's a history of these flying boxes.
Yep.
There's also a history of flying boxes attacking people, UFOs, in Brazil.
It's like the ghost of an angry UPS man,
Yeah, or something, or a haunted mailbox.
Yeah. Well, the black cubes have been seen as well. I mean, those are. There's been reports of those in Texas, UFO type things. Yeah. So, what was the composition of these boxes that you, as much as you could tell, were they like metallic or? Well,
it was just like a faint heat outline of a box.
Right.
Okay. Very, very faint. Not terribly different than the ambient temperature of the surroundings,
but noticeable.
Yeah. And several of the team members were picking this up on their FLIR unit. So unfortunately, on FLIR units, you don't run them in the record mode all the time. It eats up your battery life, and you have a finite amount of space that you can record data. So about the time he hit record, it started dissipating. So it's like, oh, well, we've got the experiential, data here. People, we're going to record this when we get back to camp. So we met up with that team, and it's like, well, let's vector one of our groups into the area where this box or cube was, and see if they can detect anything. Well, I think I sent you the video of this.
It was so cool. You did.
And our team is approaching, where this box or cube was. And remember, this is in the wintertime. There's no vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
As they approach the area where the cube is, they are red, or the white hot heat signatures on the FLIR, and they disappear.
Yeah.
They wink out of existence.
It is so cool looking.
And it was so startling that the audio is, you can hear one of the team members say, "Did they just disappear?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, from the team's perspective, all they encountered was they went to this area, and it seemed really dark and very environmentally dense, if that makes any sense, very heavy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when they approached this area, they didn't encounter any resistance. There were no brambles, there were no briars, there were no, tanglefoot vines, nothing like that. And when they turned around to come out of it, they started encountering briars and brambles and fighting their way through bushes that weren't there before when they went in. So it's almost like there was a little bubble of altered reality right there where that was. And it was dissipating as they were standing there, experiencing this. And by the time they started to come out of this location, everything had returned to normal, which was, dead vines and, dried up brambles and sticker bushes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like a
glitch. But it wasn't enough to...
It's like a glitch in the Matrix, man. Yeah.
Right. And, but it's important to note that there wasn't enough, briars and brambles that would mask their heat signature, because all this stuff was dead in the wintertime.
Yeah.
While one of our team members, she was watching this, she turns to her right, and there's a little tiny copse of trees, and she says, "Who or what is that?" And there's one or two heat signatures that appear to be some sort of entity giving off heat watching us.
Yeah, and in the middle of nowhere, because you guys were all together. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So cool. And all of our teams were, right there. So we had accountability for everybody. So once again, there were these things, these entities putting off some sort of heat, observing us. So, once all of this, we got the team recovered and we all got together and we were discussing among ourselves, should we continue investigating? Or should we go back to our campsite, do an after-action review, try to record this, while it's still fresh on our minds? So we're debating this back and forth, and I pretty much had to put my foot down and say, look, okay, this is amazing. This is remarkable. We have probably the only known footage, video-wise, that I'm aware of somebody approaching a portal and disappearing. I don't know if any out there.
Not declassified if they are there. Yeah. Nothing in the public sector.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to go back to camp and, debrief. And I get this radio call from Glenn, who's our base camp operator. And he goes, "Hey, Trey, there's somebody here that really wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, Glenn, I'll see you in a little bit." And he goes, No, it's not me. It's somebody else. And I'm like, "Somebody else? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, we have a visitor." Okay.
Yeah.
So tell our visitor that I'll be here directly, but, we've got stuff to do when we get back. So, we gather up our gear and secure everything and start moving the half mile back to our base camp. When I enter back into base camp, to my surprise, I found a businesswoman.
Yeah.
Here we are, February, in the middle of nowhere in the wintertime. And there's this businesswoman standing there in loafers, slacks, blouse, and a blazer.
She was just out there to ask you how your car warranty was and if you needed another update on it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, it seems like those people can find
They'll
you
find you.
regardless.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
They're ubiquitous. And this woman was absolutely adamant. I mean, almost forceful, and she was acting very strange, very off. Glenn, like I said, our base camp operator, years of experience as a paramedic, he thought she was acting like she was inebriated.
Mm-hmm.
That was how she was acting. And she wanted the team to drop what we were doing and follow her to this deserted road in the nature preserve and go way down deep into the boonies, where she said there was an old structure that was inhabited by something that she called monkey bears.
Monkey bears. Cool. That'd be a good name for a band, though.
Yeah. And she was insistent. I mean, almost to the point of being aggressive about it. And I'm like, okay, look, I don't really have time to deal with you. And quite frankly, I don't think this is a good idea, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, is she setting us up to rip us off? We carry a lot of really expensive...
Murder you or something, yeah.
Yeah.
But you had quite a team, so it's interesting. What was she wearing?
She was wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer.
Nothing geared up to be out in the winter in the middle of nowhere.
No, like she just came out of an office.
Yeah. So it makes this even weirder.
And so, she's just acting really weird. And probably the strangest thing she does is she's talking to us, and then she stops and she walks out about maybe 20 yards, 30 yards from where we were. And she's still in the edge of the light of our lanterns and lamps. And she squats down and urinates.
Yeah, that's odd. You don't see that every day.
No, you don't. And so we got the woman's name, and I started looking into it afterwards, and there actually is a woman by this name in this area that matches the description of the woman that visited us, that is a licensed professional. And I'm not going to go into what her profession is, but it's something that you have to be highly educated and be licensed. And, talking about education, something that I forgot to mention is when she was talking to me, she started asking, where did you go to university? And I said, at the University of West Georgia. And she goes, oh, I went there too. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. I said, what were some of your professors? And she started naming off professors that I knew.
Oh, that's odd.
She goes, she goes, I have a degree in psychology. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So you're naming off professors I know. You're claiming to have gone to the same university as me. Then you have a degree in the same field. What are the coincidences of a wayward businesswoman in the middle of the forest in the wintertime wearing her rather snappy loafers and blazer, going to the same university and studying with the same professors as I?
She's out there with some breakthroughs on some monkey bears, bro. Right. It's an odd thing anyway, but she does sound drunk, dude. I mean, but either way, she wasn't dressed for being out there. And how the hell did she find you guys?
Right. And it was, I started doing some research into it, and I came across some encounters of that people had with the men in black.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, a woman in black, yeah.
And, they're improperly dressed for the occasion, or their attire is antiquated. They don't understand social cueing. They don't, their mannerisms are off. They don't understand facial communications and body language. And they don't have a sense of what is and is not proper, i.e. urinating in front of a group of people you don't know.
Yeah.
Is not proper.
I mean, we just met, maybe after a couple of hangouts,
Yeah. So here are the options. Is either A, I encountered a real professional licensed lady in the middle of the woods in her blazer, having the absolute worst night of her life, which, if disclosed, would probably ruin her in her career.
Yeah.
That's option one.
Yep.
Option two, that this is somebody mimicking a real person.
Yeah, Yeah, like a skinwalker, for instance.
Right.
Hmm.
Or a doppelganger.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I made a decision not to approach this person because, later on, because if I did and I said, hey, you were out there drunk, acting crazy, peeing in front of everybody. Oh, I sure hope it doesn't ruin your career. The way she would actually, well, that's not me.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it was a doppelganger, she once again would say, hey, that's not me.
Right.
So there wasn't much of a return on my investment in tracking her down and interviewing her.
No, you made the right call.
So, that was that was that evening we finally got her to go away, and she just struck such an odd nerve in all of us that my buddy, who's the ranger, I said, Tim, do you have your sidearm on you? And he goes, yeah, of course. And I said, you and I are going to move outside of the camp about 50 yards, and we're just going to go around the camp to see if anybody was left behind, because I am not comfortable with this whole situation. And so she eventually left, and we were able to do our after-action review. And the transcript of our after-action review is in the book. It's word for word. And when you read through it, these are real, down-to-earth, professional people describing what we encountered that evening, and it's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, it is, man. I'm stuck on the monkey bear thing. Did you ever go find it, or did you ask her where the structure was? Maybe that's your next book.
The next day we had a few hours before we had to break camp. We did find this road, and we drove down it, and it was gated. The Department of Natural Resources had it gated about halfway down its length, and we hiked maybe 2 or 3 miles past the gate. We never found a structure. We were not, beset upon by wild monkey bears or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, and go ahead.
Yeah, or gummy bears or any kind of bears. Right?
any damn bears out there, yeah. Well, it is interesting, too, because if she was just some drunk lady, then the behavior kind of checks out. But the oddities are the weird stuff, the like you said, the Men in Black type of thing, where they're socially incredibly awkward. They are not dressed for the occasion. They've got weird. Now, did you notice like her skin looked a little off or gaunt or anything like that?
It was dark, and we were operating off a lantern light, so I really didn't get a very good look at her like you would in the sunlight.
Did she have an interesting like foreign sounding accent or anything like that?
Not that I recall. No.
Sometimes they talk a little weird, a little robotic. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Now that something you mentioned, you refreshed my memory because I'm going off an abbreviated set of notes.
Yeah.
After we got done with our after action review, one of our team members by the name of Lee heard a voice, a metallic, robotic sounding voice off in the distance as he was returning to his campsite, where he had his tent set up. So, once again, a disembodied voice, you go right back to Skinwalker Ranch, and they've got, reports of, people hearing voices, 30 yards above them, and here's Lee hearing this strange voice, coming from the woods that sounds, metallic or robotic.
Yeah. Now, is this area on like a ley line or anything like that? Have you guys looked into kind of the geo anomalies in the area? Yeah,
it is and I'm not going to exactly talk about what latitude it is, but it is in a latitude that is known for high strangeness.
Okay, then that's all we need. We don't need to give anything away here.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. Okay. Okay. Well, what happened after her? Was that all that happened on that particular investigation in February?
Yeah, pretty much that was it.
I say that's all. It was crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, that was it. Yeah, it's pretty mild compared to your last one with people turning into orbs and then missing time and disappearing from flare cameras and then cryptids standing down there giving off heat signatures where nobody else was. Is it possible that entity or whatever may have shapeshifted or something like that and been the entity that was off to the side and then appeared as this woman later on? I mean, anything goes out there, right?
Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I mean, you're just, you're just grasping at straws as far as explanations on this. And one of the, it's kind of funny, you were talking about cryptids, the guys that came down from Carolinas, the cryptid researchers, they were very much cryptid researchers. And I remember the next morning, one of the gentlemen who, experienced all this, just sitting there with this rather odd look on his face. And I said, man, what's wrong? He goes, my whole world just changed. Everything I thought was, I thought I knew what was going on before. He goes, all of that is upside down now.
Well,
I said, well, welcome to the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly right. It is a rabbit hole, but you view it as such. There are a lot of people, man, that are just cryptid people, and then they have blinders onto everything else. And there's some people that are UFOs or nuts and bolts crafts coming from other star systems, and they have blinders onto everything else. It's all connected, right? I mean, there's got to be, and that's how you view it as well, which is why it makes your investigation so fascinating. You're not this is what is going on, because number one, you're smart enough and you're coherent enough to know that we can't determine that. And then the other part about it is that you are open to the patchwork that is the phenomena, because that's what it is. It's a menagerie of things that happen, and especially in this area, you're getting a lot of great stuff going on in one particular area, which is so cool, man. I mean, it's just great that you found it, and it's great that you're investigating it.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful as human beings, not only in doing paranormal research, but in our lives in general. Of number one, putting experiences into boxes, which strikes me as kind of silly.
Yeah,
being closed-minded about things. And somehow thinking that everything's not connected, because it most certainly is.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree.
It's like the adage: if you go through life with blinders on, you're going to miss about 80% of what's going on around you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it is good, and so I do think it's interesting that you had folks that go out there with a specialized field, or they specifically only want to look at this part of the phenomena, and then they experience something like that, and man, it'll shock your world.
Oh, yeah, their world was definitely rocked, that's for sure.
Yeah. Will you tell me about the part in your book about Knox Magby?
Knox Magby, that was actually not too long ago. That was in June of 2020.
Did we skip over an experience that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I mean, yeah, tons of it. We had I'll just abbreviate some of it, and then we'll get to Knox Magby.
Yes, sir.
But in 2018, we had done a remote trek to another meadow like the one that we had been investigating. We thought, well, maybe we have other anomalous areas in this region.
Yeah.
And we had hiked to this other meadow about 7 miles away. We had very rugged cross-country hiking. And while we were there, we had set up camp in a fire break, through the forest that had been cut by the Department of Natural Resources. And in the middle of the night, two of my team members observed a beam shooting down that fire break, like this very intense beam of light.
Huh. And
one of the team members also noticed what looked like the sunrise in the west, like this orange glow in the western sky, but obviously the sun doesn't rise in the west.
Right.
When we woke up the next morning, one of our team members noticed that his pack had a stick woven through the hip belt. And I think I sent you that photograph too.
Yes, that was crazy.
And it was set up in such a way that he could not have set his pack onto this stick or branch accidentally. Something or someone actually had to pick up his pack and weave one side of this branch under his hip belt on one side and over the top of his hip belt on the opposite. So that was very odd.
Yeah.
Well, while all of this was going on, even more strange stuff was happening by our base camp team, several miles away. We hiked back to an extraction point, radioed for them to come get us. And we got back, and we were surprised when other team members started relating their experience in the meadow that morning. They had gone out there, and they had noticed two, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call them tracks.
Okay.
But they're not really tracks, but this, like you would imagine, like a tractor trail, through high grass.
Okay.
But the weird thing is this thing started in the middle of the meadow and ended in the meadow. It was almost like something was dropped into the meadow. It drove a distance and then was lifted back out. The grass was not broken. It was bent over.
Like crop circles. Like
exactly,
the nodes are, okay. Damn.
Exactly. And there were molehills, anthills, and small saplings in these tracks that were not disturbed, that were still vertical and were not compressed. There were no tread marks. And what makes it also interesting is near the terminus of this track, we had been reviewing some photographs from the previous year. And in one of the photographs, at the end of the meadow, near where these tracks terminated, this year, the previous year, it looked like there was a cryptid watching us from the edge of the woods, some sort of creature that was observing us.
Yeah.
So 2 team members went out later that afternoon and took a full spectrum camera. And they were following the tracks along, and they're looking through their full spectrum camera, and lo and behold, they find a cube.
This damn cube.
Manifesting itself.
Yeah.
And so they go to photograph it, and to their disappointment, there was no SD card in the camera.
Damn it.
And these are seasoned researchers, and they just had a whole litany of apologies when they got back.
It happens.
And
to the best
we went
of us,
back out there, and we could and it was gone. The anomalous cube was gone. But once again, these one's a very well-known cryptid researcher. His partner is a electrical engineer, very down-to-earth, scientific kind of guy. Both of them sent me affidavits. This is what we saw through the full spectrum camera. And so, it's a valid, witness statement.
Absolutely.
Something else we tried back in November of 19 is an SD session.
Oh, like
which
a spirit
I don't know
box.
if your listeners are familiar. Yeah, with a spirit box.
Okay. But for the listeners that aren't familiar, please. Yes, sir.
Right. Yeah. They've. I'm sure most of your listeners have seen the ghost shows. Where they use a ghost box. The SD session is similar to that, but with a little bit of difference, where we try to take out any kind of chance interpretation by the listener. We take a ghost box, and it hops around on FM frequencies, and we put sound canceling earbuds connected to the output of the ghost box. We put those on an individual that we call the receiver. And so we put those into the ear of the receiver, and over those earbuds, we put a set of shooting muffs. So he is completely isolated. The only thing that he or she can hear is what's coming out of the ghost box. We also put a blindfold on this individual, so they can't see what's going on around them. Their instructions are, if they hear any intelligible word, regardless of what it is, they are to repeat it. So if they hear kumquat or rutabaga, they just say rutabaga.
Yeah.
They don't know if it has anything to do with what's going on around them. They just are repeating what's coming through the ghost box. But this pretty much takes out any anticipation of the listener on what the questions are, or trying to make words fit what they perceive the question is. They're just spouting out words. And that's a pretty common practice in the paranormal world. And one of my beliefs is, let's take best practices from these different fields and bring them to the meadow, shake it up and see what happens. And we actually engaged in a 2-way conversation with an entity. And the entity was kind of cool at the beginning, talking about the portals, and then I started trying to dig down into what exactly some of the phenomenology was, electromagnetism, radiation, microgravities, things like this. And it started becoming very agitated, very upset with us, not threatening, but like maybe we were getting into areas that we didn't need to be getting into, into certain concepts that we just best leave alone.
It's like you didn't have enough clearance for the paranormal world.
Right. Yeah, we didn't have a need to know.
A need to know, right?
And so that was really amazing. And the folks that have watched that video, and I've got the transcript that's in the book. It's pretty amazing. I know there are naysayers out there saying, it's all coincidence and all of that. Yeah, you know what? At this stage, I don't believe in coincidence anymore. It's synchronicity.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm a big fan of the synchronicities. So for the folks, just to be very clear on it, so what happens is that you're asking a question that this person cannot hear. There's an FM receiver in their ears. They are blindfolded. So you are asking basically the universe or the spirit or this entity to use this individual with the FM frequencies as a conduit to answer questions that you're asking, just for the folks, just for clarification.
Absolutely. And, some of the theory on that is that it is a manifestation on a quantum level of the observer effect.
Yeah.
That by asking the question, you are influencing what random snippets of words happen to coincide at that exact moment in the universe on the ghost box.
Right. I've got to get a reference for it. So Bumblebee from the Transformers. Remember, he didn't actually talk. He talked through his radio. And it was different snippets of songs or clips or whatever. And that's the equivalent of that, just with ghosts or entities.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. And, we're calling them entities. The wonderful John Keel, he called them ultra-terrestrial. That was a term he used.
I love that. Yeah.
And I started thinking about that, and not to diminish his work, but the term I use is paradimensionals.
I like that too.
These are things. So we are communicating with some sort of paradimensional intelligence. And like I said, it was just a really amazing two-way conversation that really got us interested.
It is cool. And you sent me the video of that, which was awesome. It's just an interesting process to watch. And it's really cool, man. You get some very, this is not coincidence type of information out of it, which I think is fascinating. Right. And the transcript is in the book, which I will be linking in the show notes, guys. So.
Okay. So now you were asking about Knox Magby.
Yes.
We decided to go back in June of 2020, not too long ago, and did some explorations of the Meadow, and didn't really have a whole lot going on. We had some vehicles that would lock themselves back at our base camp. We weren't able to stay right at the Meadow because COVID had shut down some of the developed campgrounds. The Department of Natural Resources had shut them down, so we were doing what's called dispersed camping. And we were staying at a very primitive hunt camp several miles away. So other than having some vehicles lock themselves and unlock themselves back at base camp, it was pretty uneventful. But while we were at the Meadow, once again, Bob, who's like a freak magnet, he was he stayed back at base camp.
That should be his call sign for his radio.
Yeah. Foxtrot Mike,
Yeah.
We were while we were out, he said that he heard the crunch of the gravel of a vehicle driving down the road through the nature preserve. And it's a very distinctive. Anybody that's ever heard a vehicle drive down a gravel road, in the woods, it's very distinctive.
Yeah.
So it was a very dark night, pitch black, and he's waiting to see a set of headlights. He'll come down the road. None ever appear. And he hears whatever it is, go past him and stop. And what makes it interesting is the only way that you would be able to drive down that road that particular night would be to use the most advanced night vision equipment that the U.S. military has. It was that dark that night.
And no lights.
And no lights.
Yeah.
Nothing. He never saw anything. He just heard it, move past him. So, what did he hear? I don't know.
Something unexplainable, man.
So while all of this was going on, we were out in the Meadow using Stephen Greer's CE5 protocol.
Yeah.
So we're trying to see if anything wants to come and manifest or come visit with us. And much to our disappointment, nothing really happened other than we saw an extraordinary number of what appeared to be satellites traversing the night sky, about 40 or 50 of them, a whole bunch of satellites.
Were they in a row or just kind of off?
Just one moving this way, one moving east-west, one moving north-south.
Not like that Starlink thing, like the Elon Musk.
No, not like the Iridium satellites or any of that stuff.
Right. Okay, that is interesting.
So they just appeared to be regular satellites, albeit a large number of them. So we came back to camp, and Bob told his story, and we thought, well, that's interesting, and went to bed. Next morning. As we were starting to, wake up and start to get our gear together to pack up and go home the next morning, one of my team members approached me, a gentleman by the name of Tony. Now, a little bit about Tony. He's a U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, has a degree in engineering, served several years in U.S. Air Force Special Operations. Another very solid, down-to-earth, real guy. And he said, Trey, I want to tell you what happened to me. He goes, at about 4:30 this morning, he goes, I woke up and I had the words Knox Magby in my head. And I said, okay, so you mean like Knox, N-O-X, Magbee, Magbee, phonetically. And he goes, yeah, Knox Magbee. Then he said, and then again at 6:30, I woke up with these same words in my head. I thought, well, that's pretty odd. I'm going to write that down and see, what I can find out. So, wrote it down, and we all said our goodbyes, went back to our various homes. And I started researching Knox Magbee that week. And I found out that Nox, Nox, is the name of the Roman goddess of the night goddess, Nox. Okay, well, good. There's a hit. Magbee turned out to be a bit more elusive. And I found an Old English word called magba, and it means kindred or children in Old English. Now, Old English was spoken in the early part of the Dark Ages, right after the Romans had left Britain. So it's reasonable to assume that Knox and Magba were contemporaneous, that the people that were speaking Old English would know about Knox because, the Romans had occupied Britain for a number of years. So I put these two together, and what you have is children of the night goddess. So you wonder, what are children that come to us at night that are small in stature that have been reported over the millennia? Well, I'll give you a hint. One of them is on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book.
Yeah, the Greys, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Greys.
Yeah, with communion. Yeah. Damn. Children of the night. Well, what about like gnomes or any other type of fae creature that could be associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. But if you go back and you look at as these historical cultures were describing the faes, we're describing trolls, we're describing fairies, gnomes, pixies, elves, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start looking at their descriptions of it, and it's like, they kind of look like Greys,
Yeah,
So, children of the night goddess.
Cool. Another cool name for a band, by the way. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another cool call sign.
I better trademark those really quick.
Yeah, trademark those. That'll work, man. Take them. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Get the
Children of the Night Goddess. Yeah, monkey bears and all that.
That'd be a dope summer festival, to go to with all those bands.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's so. What happened after that?
So, we decided to, go home and, go back to our regular lives. And my good friend Tim, the former Army Ranger, he and I started communicating, and we came up with an idea of he and I backpacking into the Meadow and actually setting up just the two of us, bring our equipment, and actually immerse ourselves in that environment. And so, we were planning that for the end of July of 2020, just a few months ago. And so I'm getting my gear together, and I started doing some research of and I'm going to butcher the name of it, the Hachu Bacau Forest in Romania.
Nailed it.
Which has some very strange stuff. And there's actually a video of a fellow doing some research out there who is yanked off of his feet by an unseen force, and had some medical issues. Once his team finally got to him. So I'm thinking about all this in my mind. Okay, what do we need to do about safety protocols? We need to explore this phenomenon, but we need to be safe and sensical about it. And so I'm thinking about all this stuff and trying to get my gear ready. And on Sunday morning, on the 19th of July, I get a phone call that my good friend Tim had collapsed while visiting a mutual friend, and he died that morning. So that was a kick in the gut. He was an integral member of ASOG, the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. And in some of the later chapters in the book, I talk about how we all did a lot of soul searching. Should we continue? Do we want to continue? How can we go forward without this integral member, of the group? Without this driven, this knowledgeable, this focused individual. And we decided to go on. And we decided to continue with the visit, the expedition in July of 2020, albeit modified a little bit. We weren't going to go and hike and spend it in the meadow. It was a very sad outing.
Yeah.
But something we felt like we should do, but not without some discovery. During that outing, we hiked back out to the meadow, and there was an area where I had experienced some very, very intense disorientation, almost to the point where if I hadn't had another team member with me, I could have gotten lost in an area that I've been, numerous times. And like I'd mentioned before, I'm an Eagle Scout, a former Army intel guy. I've hunted big game in Africa, North America, backpacked all over the country. I don't get twisted around in the woods, especially places I've been. And, that event was so startling that if I hadn't had another team member there and had radio comms back to base camp, I could have ended up in one of David Paulides' books.
Yeah.
So David, if you hear this and you're interested, give me a call. Talk about what happened on this.
We'll get you hooked up.
Yeah, but so we months later we returned to this spot, and very close to where this happened, in a small island in the middle of a stream adjacent to the meadow, we saw a sapling. The sapling was about 12 feet tall, and the top of the sapling had two branches growing out of the top of it, where it came up and then split. And those two branches have been brought around and fastened at the top into a perfect oval, almost like the top of an oval of an ankh.
Damn. And that's not something you'd ever seen before, so it wasn't something that happened at a young age and then grew that way?
No.
It was done when it was 12 foot tall. Yeah, and it was in a little island in the middle of a stream, 12 feet up in the air. And I don't know how you could do it without damaging and destroying the sapling. And it was so odd that we took a photograph of it and decided to leave it alone. And the last time we went and visited it last weekend, it no longer was like that, which is fine. But I started doing some more research on that, and that particular oval shape, in some cultures denotes a doorway or a portal or an entrance. That's the symbology of it. Yeah.
So it's strange that we found this sapling tied into that shape, that structure, at the beginning of the meadow, where we've experienced all of these strange portals and, shifts in dimensions and all of this.
Yeah. That is very odd for a very odd area. I mean, it's par for the course out there, but it's still an interesting find for sure. And then it's even more interesting that it was undone the next time. Huh. Well, you're an Eagle Scout. What kind of knot was it? Was it a bowler, or what did they have that strapped up at?
Well, it was really more of a lashing than a knot. If we want to get real technical about it, but
I knew you'd know. That's why I asked.
But it was like I said, in this island in this stream, 12 feet up in the air, so we couldn't really get close enough to it to really determine exactly how it's fashioned. But it looked almost like a lashing, like layer upon layer, wrapping around the two ends of the two branches.
And the tree probably wasn't strong enough to support weight for somebody to climb up there, tie it off. It would have just broken.
No, it wasn't any more than maybe an inch in diameter. It was, a real wispy sapling.
Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe it was one of those monkey bears, dude.
It could have been, those damn monkey bears.
But I think the portal idea is very cool. I think that is an awesome concept, and it just kind of fits in with the area. It's just such an anomalous zone out there that you guys have stumbled across. So what else has happened out there?
Well, as recently as this past weekend.
Yeah, I know you went out there. You said you had a very interesting account. So what happened this past weekend?
Well, we decided to set up some new pieces of equipment we have, which are the Psionics color night vision cameras, which are really, really a cool piece of equipment. And we set up at Stevens Lake, which, I go into a lot of detail on some of the anomalous happenings at Stevens Lake. And I recorded 2 sets of lights hanging in the air, stationary. And they were so stationary that at first I thought I had discovered a radio tower that I had just happened to ignore all these previous times. And these were the anti-collision lights halfway up a radio tower. They were that stationary. So I looked up above them, thinking I would see the red anti-collision beacon on the tip of the tower. Nothing was there, just these 2 lights two pairs of lights hanging. They look like headlamps or headlights. Two lights close together, flashing in tandem. Two sets of them. And then they slowly started to traverse across the sky, very slowly, and they'd stop and be stationary for a while. Then they'd move laterally, and they'd stop, and then they eventually moved down below the horizon where we couldn't see them. What makes it interesting is that whole evening we had noticed a lot of air traffic, aircraft, and you could see the red anti-collision lights on the underside of the aircraft. You could see the red and blue navigation lights on the edge of the wings. And they were very distinctive. You could look at these and say, these are obviously airplanes. These two lights were so different than anything else we saw that evening that it really struck me as interesting. And I'm going to do some more analysis on the video in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Are you familiar with the Oz effect at all?
No.
Okay, so the Oz effect has to do with whenever either a UFO sighting or you're walking around in the woods and a Bigfoot appears or some sort of paranormal activity occurs, or right before it occurs, everything goes absolutely silent. No birds, no wildlife of any kind, no noise from trees. Everything sounds like nothing, and it's called the Oz effect. And it usually is associated with experiencing paranormal phenomena. Have you guys experienced something like that out there?
Not exactly like that. No, that doesn't ring any bells. Sometimes when we go out there, we notice there's not a lot of wildlife.
Okay.
And it's an area that you should have, just buku's wildlife.
Right.
But I don't recall any periods of silence, like you're describing. That doesn't ring any bells.
And it's not 100% of the time. It's just something associated with the phenomena sometimes, and with a variety of phenomena. So if you'd experience it, apparently it's incredibly noticeable. So it's not something that would go, oh, that's, well, awesome, man. Well, I have just really enjoyed talking with you, brother. I cannot wait to continue on with your story here. And let's have you back on soon, man. I want to hear more about this. I'm going to get out to that damn meadow with you sometime. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. Well, you have an open invitation.
Thank you, my friend. I will definitely take that up on you. Let folks know where they can find you, even though I will be linking some of the stuff in the show notes. But in your own words, how can people follow and keep track of you down here?
Oh, probably the best way is the Oxford Paranormal Society Facebook group. And I hate to say this, I'm a little embarrassed. I haven't kept our webpage up. That's bad on me. But probably the best way is through the Facebook group.
Yeah. Well, okay, and you've been busy, so it's okay. I will link that then in the show notes as well as how you find your book.
Okay.
I just want to thank you again, man. This is a phenomenal story. You're a great guest, and I had a good time with you, brother. You're just a good friend now. You're part of the family, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. We will talk to you soon, brother.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Massive thanks to Trey Hudson, author of The Meadow Project, Explorations into the South's Skinwalker Ranch, and we really want to thank him for his time on coming on the show here. Incredible dude, incredible story. Can't wait to see where this goes and what happens next with it. I will be following it pretty close for you guys. We will have Trey back on with new developments as they occur. He's got some big things in the works that we didn't talk about, but they're going to be huge, and you guys are going to love it. Book is linked in the show notes as well as his Facebook group. You guys please check him out. This show, you can find us at Instagram, Facebook, at Twitter, and if you want to email the show directly, you can do so at expandingrealitypodcast@gmail.com. And you know what? Y'all be good to each other.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Grandma, can I have the chocolate chips?
This secret recipe moment made possible by Emory Heart and Vascular Center. When Grandma needed heart care, she came to Emory. The difference? Emory Healthcare performs more heart procedures annually than anyone else in Georgia, which means better outcomes for our patients. And we offer advanced and personalized treatments developed by our top specialists that others don't. Like Grandma knows, where you start your heart care matters. Smart Cookie. EmoryHealthcare.org/smartcookie.